With us, even in the chaos of the Trump administration, today's exit has shocked and stunned much of the world. U.S. President Donald Trump fired his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. The president broke the surprise news on Twitter, announcing CIA Director Mike Pompeo had a choice to be America's top diplomat. A short while ago, Tillerson made a statement in which he warned of the challenges that his successor will face around the world, especially from Russia.
And much work remains to respond to the troubling behavior and actions on the part of the Russian government. Russia must assess carefully as to how its actions are in the best interest of the Russian people and of the world more broadly. Continuing on their current trajectory is likely to lead to greater isolation on their part, a situation which is not in anyone's interest.
Now, Tillerson was reportedly on a tour of Africa when it's said that he first heard the news of his sacking. So that tour, of course, was cut short. The world may have been shocked, but to Washington insiders, Tillerson's departure came as no big surprise. They've known about friction between Trump and his Secretary of State for some time.
Rex Tillerson initially seemed an unusual pick for Secretary of State. The former head of ExxonMobil was an oilman from Texas with no foreign policy experience. But as a Washington outsider, he also fit in with the unconventional nature of the new Trump administration. At the start, Trump appeared to have great confidence in him.
Rex will be a fierce advocate for America's interests around the world and has the insights and talents necessary to help reverse years of foreign policy blunders and disasters.
But barely 6 months into the job, reports started to circulate that Tillerson's relationship with the president had soured.
Tillerson, are you committed to staying in your position as Secretary of State?
I'm not going anywhere.
How long will you stay for?
As long as the president lets me.
How's your relationship with the president right now?
It's good.
But the two men were known to be at odds over a number of issues, including the Iran nuclear deal. Trump said this was one reason for his dismissal.
But we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess he felt it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently.
Trump was also accused of publicly undermining Tillerson on several occasions. When Tillerson talked about the possibility of direct dialogue with North Korea last December, Trump said he was, quote, wasting his time. Tillerson also appeared to be caught off guard about the recent offer of talks to Pyongyang on his trip to Africa last week. Perhaps the lowest point was when Tillerson failed to deny outright reports that he had called Trump a moron. Even so, he said he was not expecting to be fired and had wanted to stay in the job.
Yeah, Washington insiders saying this was definitely not a bromance. Let's go now to our correspondent in Washington, Karsten Phenomen. Good evening to you, Karsten. There have been rumblings of differences between the president and his Secretary of State. The question seemed to be not whether Mr. Tillerson would go, but rather when.
That is absolutely true. This speculation that Tillerson was on his way out have been around for many months now. Having said that, the timing of the firing now is odd and was surprising, even to many observers of the political scene here in Washington. Apparently it had been in the making for a few weeks, and we heard today from some insiders who said, well, we saw it coming, but still it was a bombshell when it became public today. And it was also not the best timing when you look at Tillerson's trip to Africa, because he was on a mission there to mend fences with important allies such as Nigeria, Kenya and Ethiopia after the president himself had insulted African countries. And it looks like that the olive branch that Rex Tillerson had been holding to the African leaders now has been burned by Donald Trump. I don't think that he cares a lot, but definitely this is an odd timing to fire your Secretary of State just hours after he returns from an important foreign trip.
Yeah, that's a very important point to make. And we know that Mr. Tillerson, it seems, was blindsided by this announcement today. The U.S. president, however, he was rather candid when he discussed why he let Tillerson go. Take a listen.
Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess he thought it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently. So we were not really thinking the same.
So it sounds like there, Carsten, the president's describing oil and water. I mean, these men apparently did not mix well at all.
Yeah, even though Donald Trump insists that they got along well, I don't think that's true. I mean, at the beginning, as we've also seen in the report, there was a kind of honeymoon period, but the relationship soured pretty quickly, and the two men just have very different characters, very different approaches. Rex Tillerson himself said at one point that he was still learning how to communicate with the president, and apparently it just didn't work out. And so, of course, that decision, you might say, makes sense at some point then to part ways. Once again, the timing was clearly odd.
And now that we know Tillerson is leaving in about a month or so, what can we expect from the incoming Secretary of State, Pompeo?
What we can expect is a foreign policy chief who is more aligned with the president. That is also a hope at the State Department, where many civil servants saw with concern that their influence on the government and its foreign policy was diminished under Tillerson simply because he didn't click with the president. So that might be different, and we might see, to put it in a positive way, a more coherent American foreign policy, and no longer one where the Secretary of State is repeatedly contradicted by his boss. So I think when people talk to Mike Pompeo, they can be much more assured that what he says also reflects the views of Donald Trump.
Our Washington correspondent, Carsten Van Namen, on the story for us tonight. Carsten, thank you very much.